we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
First off, just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. You are the second critical ingredient in what we're doing this evening. Once we prepare the young people to speak, then they must have a live audience to get the real world experience that we're trying to simulate. We know that in the marketplace, two things are being looked for. One's ability to communicate and to communicate effectively. And then second, to be innovative, to problem solve. And so daily, we're hitting those two targets. We want to improve their ability to communicate and then their ability to create, to problem solve. And so those two targets are behind tonight. I believe that any leader has the ability to take a stage, stand behind a podium, or stand on stage without a podium and command an audience's attention. And so for about 2 weeks now, we've been looking at excerpts from Dr. King's speeches. We are exploring what we call declamation. That's the art of performing an already famous speech. And we're looking at things like the ability to project your voice, to enunciate your words, to emotionally connect with text, to have proper posture, to breathe correctly, to have rapport with the audience. Again, we want our young people to come before audiences with regularity so that this is nothing that frightens them, that they're able to come to the stage and take command. And so over the course of this evening, you'll get an opportunity to learn more about Dr. King. They're providing a lens into his philosophy and into his very essence. So with no further ado, we're going to get started. As you can see in your programs, that we have a few students working on similar speeches. And so the first one we're looking at is this speech that was delivered in 1955. And so Dr. King was relatively new to Montgomery, to Alabama. And so he hadn't really stirred up any animosity, which is one of the reasons why the local leaders there were willing to choose him after Rosa Parks was arrested. And so after Rosa Parks was arrested, a couple of days after, they formed a committee and they began this new organization, and it was called the Montgomery Improvement Association. And Dr. King became the leader. And he spoke that day in such a compelling way that even Miss Rosa Parks said, okay, yeah, we have our leader. And of course, as most of you know, Rosa Parks wasn't the first person to be arrested or to resist moving from her seat, but she had such stand-up character that she became the ideal person to then become the genesis for the modern civil rights movement. And the sad thing, we're only talking about 13 years from the time Dr. King started and the time that he was assassinated in Memphis. Okay, so a short span of time, but a remarkable amount of work that happened within that time. So we're going to go to the first speech, and once again, that is the address to the first Montgomery Improvement Association mass meeting. And so our first speaker up today is Isabella Acosta. Give her a hand as she comes.
Isabella Acosta. Address to the first Montgomery Improvement Association mass meeting by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This situation is not at all new. This problem has existed over endless years. For many years now, Negroes in Montgomery and so many other areas have been inflicted with the paralysis of crippling fear on buses in our community. On so many occasions, Negroes have been intimidated and humiliated and oppressed because of the sheer fact that they were Negroes. I don't have time this evening to go into the history of these numerous cases. Many of them are now lost in the thick fog of oblivion, but at least one stands before us now with glaring dimensions. Just the other day, just last Thursday to be exact, one of the finest citizens in Montgomery, not one of the finest Negro citizens, but one of the finest citizens in Montgomery, was taken from a bus and carried to jail and arrested because she refused to get up and give her seat to a white person. Now, the press would have us believe that she refused to leave a reserved section for Negroes, but I want you to know this evening that there is no reserved section. The law has never been clarified at that point. Now, I think I speak with legal authority, not that I have legal authority, but I think I speak with legal authority behind me when I say that the law, the ordinance, the city ordinance has never been totally clarified. Mrs. Rosa Parks is a fine person, and since it had to happen, I'm happy to a person like Mrs. Parks, for nobody can doubt the boundless reach of her integrity. Nobody can doubt the height of her character. Nobody can doubt the depth of her Christian commitment and the devotion to the teachings of Jesus. And I'm happy. Since it had to happen, it happened to a person that nobody can call a disturbing factor in the community. Mrs. Parks is a fine Christian person, unassuming, and yet there is character there. Mrs. Parks is a fine Christian person, and just because she refused to get up, she was arrested. And you know, my friends, there comes a time when people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression. There comes a time, my friends, when people get tired of being plunged across the abyss of humiliation, where they experience the bleakness of nagging despair. There comes a time when people get tired of being pushed out of the glittering sunlight of life's July and left standing amid the piercing chill of an alpine November. There comes a time. We are here. We are here this evening because we are tired now. And I want to say that we are not here advocating violence. We have never done that. I want it to be known throughout Montgomery and throughout this nation that we are Christian people. We believe in the Christian religion. We believe in the teachings of Jesus. The only weapon that we have in our hands this evening is the weapon of protest. That's all. Thank you.
Brianna Rivera, address to the First Montgomery Improvement Association mass meeting by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My friends, don't let anybody make us feel that we're to be compared in our action with the Ku Klux Klan or with the White Citizen Council. There will be no crosses burned at any bus stop in Montgomery. There will be no white persons pulled out of their homes and taken out on some distant road and lynched for not cooperating. There will be nobody among us who will stand up and define the Constitution of this nation. We only assemble here because of our desire to see right exist. My friends, I want it to be known that we're going to work with grim and bold determination to gain justice on the buses in this city. And we are not wrong. We are not wrong in what we are doing. If we are wrong, the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, the Constitution of the United States is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong. If we are wrong, Jesus of Nazareth was merely a utopian dreamer that never came down to earth. If we are wrong, justice is a lie. Love has no meaning. And we are here determined here in Montgomery to work and fight until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. I want to say, in all of our actions, we must stick together. Unity is the great need of the hour. And if we are united, we can get many of the things that we not only desire, but which we justly deserve. And don't let anybody frighten you. We are not afraid of what we're doing because we're doing it within the law. There is never a time in our American democracy that we must ever think we are wrong when we protest. We reserve that right. When labor all over this nation came to see that it would be trampled over by capitalistic power, it was nothing wrong with labor getting together and organizing and protesting for its rights. We, the disinherited of this land, we who have been oppressed so long, are tired of going through long nights of captivity, and now we're reaching out for the daybreak of freedom and justice and equality. Thank you.
All right, those young ladies spoke with passion, brought those speeches alive. You could see Dr. King in Alabama in coming before the first Montgomery Improvement Association as a young man who was full of wisdom. And so now we're going to move forward. I believe we're going to give us the ballot as our next speech. And this is a very interesting one that happens in 1957. What's interesting here is that this is like 3 years after having celebrated Brown versus the Board of Education. So you get this landmark decision, people are happy, but of course, it's not being enforced. And so Dr. King then meets in Washington, D.C., and that's when this speech is given. And he understands how important it is to be a part of the political process, to be able to have a voice. And so here is when he speaks about give us the ballot. And there was one thing that I wanted to bring before your attention that struck me last night as I was even thinking about this even more. And listen to this quote. This is what someone said they learned from Dr. King about politics. First, politics is the process by which we, in a democracy, create laws from our beliefs. Second, politics is the process of determining who gets how much of the whats, whens, wheres, and hows in 5 key areas: income, education, healthcare, housing, and justice. It's still all about that. These 5 key areas. Who gets things: income, education, healthcare, housing, and justice. And so not much has changed. Those are still key areas in which we want to have a voice. And so coming to us now is Giavi Edwards. And she'll be followed by Jasmine Person.
Giavi Edwards, Give Us the Ballot, by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. All types of conniving methods are still being used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters. The denial of this sacred right is a tragic betrayal of the highest mandates of our democratic tradition. And so, our most urgent request to the President of the United States and every member of Congress is to give us the right to vote. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer have to worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer plead to the federal government for passage of an anti-lynching law. We will, by the power of our vote, write the law on the statute books of the South and bring an end to the dastardly acts of the hooded perpetrators of violence. Give us the ballot, and we will transform the salient misdeeds of bloodthirsty mobs into the calculated good deeds of orderly citizens. Give us the ballot, and we will fill our legislative halls with men of goodwill. and send to the sacred halls of Congress men who will not sign a Southern manifesto because of their devotion to the manifesto of justice. Give us the ballot, and we will place judges on the benches of the South who will do justly and love mercy. And we will place at the head of the Southern states governors who have felt not only the tang of the human, but the glow of the divine. Give us the ballot, and we will quietly and non-violently, without rancor or bitterness, implement the Supreme Court's decision of May 17, 1954. In this juncture of our nation's history, there is an urgent need for dedicated and courageous leadership. Thank you.
Jasmine Person, Give Us the Ballot by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. First, there is a need for a strong, aggressive leadership from the federal government. So far, only the judicial branch of the government has evinced this quality of leadership. If the executive and legislative branches of the government were as concerned about the protection of our citizenship rights as the federal courts have been, then the transition from a segregated to an integrated society would be infinitely smoother. But we so often look to Washington in vain for this concern. In the midst of the tragic breakdown of law and order, the executive branch of the government is all too silent and apathetic. In the midst of the desperate need for civil rights legislation, the legislative branch of the government is all too stagnant and hypocritical. This dearth of positive leadership from the federal government is not confined to one particular political party. Both political parties have betrayed the cause of justice. The Democrats have betrayed it by capitulating to the prejudices and undemocratic practices of the Southern Dixiecrats. The Republicans have betrayed it by capitulating to the blatant hypocrisy of right-wing reactionary Northerners. These men so often have a high blood pressure of words and an anemia of deeds. In the midst of these prevailing conditions, we come to Washington today pleading with the President and members of the Congress to provide a strong, moral, and courageous leadership for a situation that cannot permanently be evaded. We come humbly to say to the men in the forefront of our government that the civil rights issue is not an ephemeral, evanescent, domestic issue that can be kicked about by reactionary guardians of the status quo. It is rather an eternal moral issue which may well determine the destiny of our nation in the ideological struggle with communism. The hour is late. The clock of destiny is ticking out. We must act now before it is too late. Thank you.
Okay, so we move on down the trajectory of history to 1957, and so in May, 1963. In May of 1963, Aretha Franklin had an opportunity to join Dr. King in Chicago at Wrigley Stadium, and she was able to sing there, and that conversation led to them talking about something happening in Detroit. And so, as many of you know, Aretha Franklin's father, Reverend C.L. Franklin, was very involved in the civil rights movement. And he wanted to partner with Dr. King because he had an organization in Detroit. And so he figured that if Dr. King came, then that would galvanize people in Detroit around the movement that was happening there. And so Dr. King consented, and he showed up in Detroit. Now, 150,000 people were assembled in Detroit on the day that he gave this speech. And so it really laid the groundworks for what happened in Washington. So when he went to give the I Have a Dream speech, and a lot of the similar themes are in this speech that he gave at Cabo Hall in Detroit. So we have three young gentlemen coming to share with you this address at the Freedom Rally in Cabo Hall. Again, this speech is being given before 150,000 strong.
Aiden Menjivar, address at the Freedom Rally in Cabo Hall by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Almost 101 years ago, on September the 22nd, 1862 to be exact, a great and noble American, Abraham Lincoln, signed an executive order which was to take effect on January the 1st, 1863. This executive order was called the Emancipation Proclamation, and it served to free the Negro from the bondage of physical slavery.